By the end of the week, the Browns quarterback big board will consist of 4 names leading up to the draft. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer Sherman, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. After a private workout with Shedeur Sanders later this week, the Browns QB big board will by all accounts be finalized leading up to the draft later this month. What did Andrew Berry mean when he said the Browns quarterback room could skew younger this year? There's actually 2 answers that we'll go over and a Browns training camp detail that was revealed and what it means for Cleveland in 2025. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Yes, so Kevin Stefanski spoke at the owners' meetings down in Florida on Monday and revealed what I thought was a pretty interesting admission to sort of where the Browns are at in their evaluation of the quarterback position, specifically, though, this rookie quarterback class. He was asked about if they would host any more private workouts with quarterbacks after they have one with Shedeur Sanders later this week. Shedeur Sanders, Colorado quarterback, he has his pro day coming up on Friday, April 4th. After that, they will have a private workout with him, sort of get more intimate time with him, have him do some things that they want to see him do. And that will basically set the tone for, having evaluated the guys that they're really looking at, to get a sense of whether or not one of them is worthy of drafting number 2, arguably Shedeur Sanders, and what they want to do with that pick. And if there's, and which of these quarterbacks, if any of them, they want to take a chance on in the first round or elsewhere and sort of make their guy. So with that in mind, I think this sort of puts the kibosh and ties a nice bow on what the Browns big board going into the draft, at least, is going to look like for Cleveland. When it comes to the quarterback position, the guys that they are going to have their eye on and that they're going to be sort of monitoring and considering as guys they could draft at some point in this upcoming draft. And the big board basically consists of 4 big names. It's Cam Ward, it's Shedeur Sanders, it's Jackson Dart, it's Jalen Milroe. Those are the 4 guys that they held private sessions with at some point in the last couple of weeks, or will at some point in the next couple of weeks. Because like I said, Shedeur's coming up on Friday, and then after that, they will have hosted all those guys in a private setting. They did host Tyler Shuck on a pre-draft visit in Berea, but that's different than the private workouts that they're holding with these guys following their pro days. And so it's a different sort of setup and situation for those guys than what Tyler Shuck got. Now, that doesn't mean, and I guess I should give you the exact quote, because he was asked about it, and Andrew Berry said, well, probably not, in regards to whether or not they'd have any more private workouts. And then he said, sort of rethinking his answer, well, I should say this, we're covered making sure we see all these guys. So they're going to see them in some capacity. Maybe there's other 30 visits that are coming in. Who knows? They only have till April 6th, I believe, is the deadline for that. So there's not a ton of time left on that, but there could be some opportunities to host some guys this week or elsewhere. But with understanding where they are up against that deadline, understanding that there was only the 4 guys that they really had the private workouts with or more intimate conversations and meetings with on their sort of turf. It was Ward, Sanders, Dart, Milroe. It feels like that's the bulk of the board. Those are the guys that they are going to most notably be considering, most notably be thinking about drafting. I don't think there's certain guys on that list that I wouldn't take it to, but in the first round, potentially, the guys that they have their eye on as quarterback targets and prospects that they want to bring in and try to invest in and invest a draft capital in to sort of be a quarterback for them moving forward into the upcoming season and beyond. So, and again, there's room to maybe explore some of these other guys. It's not a hard and fast rule or anything that this is what those are the only guys the Browns are going to consider. If Will Howard's on the board in the 4th or 5th round or whatever, and they think the value's there and they want to take another quarterback, and this actually leads into another conversation that we'll have today just about the state of the quarterback room, what it could look like when it's all said and done. And if it can be made up of 2 rookies, we'll get into that here coming up. Like, that doesn't mean they can't take Will Howard or Kyle McCord or whatever, but it certainly feels like the main focus of their big board is settled. It's those 4 names: Ward, Sanders, Dart, and Milroe. And that's all just using context clues here. Like, what the guys they host on 30 visits, those who should give you insight into people, players that they like, guys that they're considering taking, guys that they want more intimate conversations with. And they've had those with some of these guys already, on top of some other positions that they've evaluated already. And so you use that as sort of context into certain players that they're interested in. Same thing with these private workouts. When you're holding a private workout, it means that it generally is an indication that they are highly interested in that player, so much so that they want to see them do some things that they sort of throw their way, or that they want an extra session or an extra chance to see them go to work and show them some things in a more personal environment. And so they did that with those 4 guys. Now, I can tell you, and based on conversations we had on Monday with the Browns, Andrew Berry basically he leaves these things open because he's never going to say never on anything. And he did, make it clear like anything is possible. They could move up, but he did say it's unlikely that they will move up to number 1 for Cam Ward. And so even though we know Cam Ward's in this conversation, you can probably take him out of the equation. I don't think the Browns are going to make a move for Cam Ward at this point. Even though that might be my pipe dream or even your pipe dream, it feels like something that is less likely to happen than actually will. So I'm at a point where Ward's in play potentially for them if he falls, if the Titans surprise everybody and don't take Cam Ward, which seems like the consensus of what is going to happen at this point, or if somebody else trades up and takes a different player. Those are the outcomes that I guess would leave Cam Ward on the board for you at number 2. But making a drastic move or an aggressive move up, it doesn't seem like it's something in the cards based on what Andrew Berry said. And so that really leaves you, even though it's 4 names, with 3 guys that the Browns are going to have their eye on: Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, and Jalen Milroe, that I think are the quarterbacks that they will consider drafting early in this draft as projects, guys they're going to develop and hope turn into a franchise quarterback in some capacity. Now, where they value those guys, do they like Shedeur more than Dart and Milroe, like I do or others do? Do they like Milroe more than others, enough where maybe him and Sanders have similar grades and they wait and they'll take Milroe instead of Sanders? Those are questions that only they can answer. And those are things that will come to light here in the coming weeks leading up to the draft. And obviously on draft night, when push comes to shove and you're actually selecting one of these players, does Shedeur Sanders fall to a point where the Browns maybe take Abdul Carter at 2 and then try to trade back up and get Sanders because they like him so much? Or is that they're playing with Milroe? Now, I do think, and I've said this repeatedly, I'll continue to say it probably at least once or twice a week leading up to the draft, trading back up into the 1st round to get any player with that from that pick 33 up is a no-brainer decision for Andrew Berry. I know he only's traded up really one time to get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in 2021. I talked about that yesterday. His moves up and down the board have generally meant me moving down, not up. But this is an instance where I think you have to do that to get that 5th-year option. Whether they take a quarterback at 2 and they want to get something else to help the roster, I think you move back into the 1st round. Or if you don't take a quarterback at 2 and you want to get your quarterback, getting him on a 5th-year option or with a 5th-year option is so valuable to this team that's trying to rebuild on the fly, find a quarterback they believe in and that they hope to have here for a long period of time. So I think that's something they should do. But those are the 4 names minus Cam Ward that I think are in play right now for this team that they have honed in on at this point. Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, know them and remember them, because those are the 3 names that I think prominently will be on the Browns' mind come draft night, April 24th, as players they'll be considering pretty highly in this draft. Guys at the top of their big board that feels pretty settled at this point based off the meetings and conversations they have had with those 4 players, Ward, Sanders, Dart, and Milroe. That's what the big board is basically centered around right now. With that said, Andrew Berry also had some comments earlier this week on Sunday at the owners' meetings about this, the what the quarterback room could look like, and the idea that it could be a younger looking group. What did he mean when he said the term skew younger? I think there's actually 2 possible answers. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility over and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. Take advantage of the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever as well. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year using the app. So in lieu of having the conversation about the Browns' pursuits of these rookie quarterbacks, what their rookie quarterback big board most likely looks like, the four names I rattled off, really three, because Cam Ward seems like he's probably not in the cards for this Browns team, considering that Andrew Berry doesn't feel inclined to trade up. But from that same Andrew Berry press conference where he talked about not trading up to number one, he also dropped an interesting line in regards to the Browns' plans at the quarterback position, and basically like what the room could ultimately sort of look like. What plan could kind of take shape here? I'll read you the exact quote here, but he was asked about just like adding to the room in terms of age, veteran versus rookie, how they're kind of approaching those things. We know they've been linked to Kirk Cousins, maybe some other veteran players as well. And his quote was, "It probably depends more on age or player rather than actual age." I'd say this will probably skew young, just to be quite frank. I think that's probably more comparable relative to our long-term goals. And so the phrase "skew young" is the one that sort of caught everybody's attention, made the rounds on social media, got everybody talking. The idea that this Browns team could have a younger looking quarterback room, and what that sort of looks like in whatever iteration it could take on. Now, when you hear the phrase "skew young," and this is the distinction that I kind of want to make here, I think there's two potential meanings for that. The first one, which we'll dissect here, is the idea that it could be a sign that they're out on some of those guys I mentioned: Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco, any of the older, aging veterans that are on the market right now. Maybe they're not going to actually pursue those guys. Maybe they're going to take a different approach to this group and keep it based in young, talented guys, and not bring in a veteran that we've sort of heard this team connected with to this point. And they're gonna take a different approach in that way. And the Cousins one is obviously the most prominent. It's also the most complicated, I think, of any of these potential quarterbacks that they could get. Somebody like Carson Wentz, you could just sign. Somebody like Joe Flacco, you could just sign. Cousins, and he does, I think, make the most sense from a standpoint of like a veteran you're looking to maybe still give you something, still something left in the tank and improve your room, while also, not necessarily giving you this great ceiling at the same time. But again, it's complicated. Like it's so many different fronts from the Cousins thing. It's a tough situation to navigate. First of all, because the Falcons want to trade him. They're going to want some sort of compensation in return. Do the Browns want to give up that compensation? Do the Browns really want to trade a draft pick, a draft asset for an aging veteran that might not be part of their longer-term plans or be part of this room beyond even next year? I don't know. They have to sort of decide that. And what they do in the draft could maybe dictate some of those things as well, because we know Kirk Cousins, and this is the other part that complicates it, has a no-trade clause. And he might not be willing to waive that no-trade clause if a team takes a rookie quarterback in the first round, or if they sort of imply that that's the direction they're going to go. So he's going to wait until after the draft to make any key decisions. At least that's what's being reported on his future, on what he wants to do, where he wants to go. And then he'll sort of make that call. I think there is some level of like, it's rich that Kirk Cousins wants to control all these things about his next destination, and whether or not he's a starter or not. I mean, you're 36 years old, aging. You got to kind of take the opportunities that are there for you, especially after a season that was pretty bad for him. I don't blame him for it. All these players want sort of control over their own destinies in that way late in their careers, especially. But in the same breath, like the Browns can't be held hostage by that. I've talked about that already. And they also can't be held hostage by the Falcons if they're going to ask for some astronomical price. Then, yeah, I think it's okay to not necessarily go get Kirk Cousins and maybe keep the group skewed young, as Andrew Berry said, and focus your attention elsewhere. So without going and getting one of those veterans, maybe what he also means by Skew Young, while still adding a veteran, what that could look like could potentially be somebody like Malik Willis, somebody who, showed some promise last year with Green Bay, is a couple years into this league and has some experience, but, still is kind of a project in that way. I sort of mapped out earlier this offseason that I felt like the room was going to take shape with a resurrection project, right? A reclamation project. I said that was Kenny Pickett, somebody who went somewhere else, washed themselves somewhat of what they were previously, gets a second chance somewhere to sort of see what they can do. That's Kenny Pickett. I think Malik Willis kind of falls in that same bucket where he saw some playing time, put some good things on tape, and now there's intrigue to see if he can revive his career elsewhere. And so maybe there's 2 reclamation projects in this room plus a rookie, maybe plus 2 rookies, maybe it's some other lower end signing that they bring in or whatever as a 4th quarterback, because they will carry 4 throughout the offseason and then cut it down to 3. But whatever the top 3 guys are going to look like, maybe it is Malik Willis reclamation project, Kenny Pickett reclamation project, and a rookie. Another name that pops up in my mind and somebody who I've talked about prominently, Joe Milton from the New England Patriots. Maybe if the Browns are going to make a trade for a quarterback, rather than give up a pick for Kirk Cousins and go older in with that, right, go the route of an older guy, they go younger and they get a guy with using a draft pick to get a deal done, who again has that upside. I think both Willis and Joe Milton have some upside to them that is intriguing, more so than even Cousins, who you kind of know what you're going to get with him at this point. I think there's value in having that, but I also think, in the name of, if you're giving up draft capital and assets and all these different things, like, would you rather give it up for the guy who could be washed at this point in his career? I don't necessarily think that's totally true, but you don't know. Like, when he gets out there on the field, we'll see. Or would you rather give it up for somebody who there's some room for them to grow and develop? Somebody like Joe Milton, somebody like Malik Willis. I kind of like that route better anyway. And so I wondered when Andrew Berry used the term skew young, if that's what he was alluding to. This idea that maybe they won't, push the envelope on or push hard to sign a veteran that's still out there on the open market, or push really hard to make a trade for Kirk Cousins and get forced into a corner where you got to do something drastic like that. And they'll stick to their guns and they'll find some different options that are still viable ones to add to the room, but maybe aren't quite on the older side of this thing. So that's the first way I think it could be interpreted, that they are out on the older veterans in this market or in this conversation right now. But there's another interpretation that I think bears discussion as well. That is what we'll get into, the second meaning of Andrew Berry dropping the phrase skew young when it comes to what their quarterback room is more likely to look like this year. We'll get into it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, to even who's cutting down the nets. Speaking of Cinderella stories, there were not really any of those this year. The one double-digit seed that got through the first weekend was Arkansas. Hard to call them a Cinderella story when Coach Calipari was their coach. And those are generally the lifeblood of college basketball this time of year. So unfortunately, we didn't get any, but that's okay, because if you missed on some of those Cinderellas in the first couple rounds, FanDuel has opportunities for you to earn your money back going into the final weekend of the tournament here this coming week. You can bet on spreads, totals, and game props for any of the remaining tournament games. I've had my eye on Florida the entire tournament. I picked them in the bracket I filled out. I put some money on them to win it all. And they have a really good chance of doing so as one of the 4-1 seeds that all made it to San Antonio this year yet again. So throw some money in the direction of the team that you like. Maybe it's Florida. Maybe it's Duke. Maybe it's Houston. Maybe there's some Auburn fans out there. Whatever it is, the FanDuel app is easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly, no matter what, and there's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action for the remainder of the tournament. FanDuel.com. All right, so we went over one interpretation of what Andrew Berry could have meant when he said that the quarterback room for the Browns is likely to skew young this upcoming season. That one was maybe that means they're out on one of these aging veterans that they've been linked to at this point. I think the other way it could be interpreted, though, is just that two of the three quarterbacks are going to be younger in this room. So that would include Kenny Pickett, who's 27. Now, I don't like it's weird with Kenny Pickett because 27, I don't really classify that as young at this point in his career, but I guess he's younger. And that's kind of what Barry was maybe suggesting there. But there's a path where Kenny Pickett's considered your veteran at 27, and you have two other guys that are younger than even him. But maybe but again, in the name of like this second interpretation or this second sort of meaning of skew young, it could just mean that we are still going to sign a veteran or trade for a veteran if it were to be Kirk Cousins. And two of the three guys are going to be young. And by young, they just mean kind of in their 20s. So a rookie and then Kenny Pickett. That could be maybe the other interpretation here. And so there maybe are still plans to go get one of those veteran guys. But like I said, maybe they just kind of consider Kenny Pickett the elder statesman of the group. That's been a theory that's been thrown around these last couple of days in hearing everybody from Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, Jimmy Haslam speak about the quarterback position. I talked yesterday about Jimmy Haslam basically giving off this aura of patience. We're going to be patient. He talked about maybe needing a year or two to identify the right quarterbacks and not trying to force the issue with that or rush into things if they don't think it's the right call. And so if that happens, like maybe Kenny Pickett actually becomes a viable starting option for this team. He did say he was coming here to compete for the job. What if he wins it? I know that's not a reality Browns fans really want to face right now. You're probably rolling your eyes just hearing it. And I get it because Kenny Pickett has a spotty history. His time in Pittsburgh, you spent as a fan of the Browns largely making fun of the Steelers for taking him in the first round with how bad he was in certain moments. But that could come to fruition where he's your sort of elder statesman of the group. He's the oldest guy. He gets the starting job, and there's even younger bodies than that behind him trying to sort of come and take it from him at some point. But to me, it feels like the phrase skew young, and this is just me in my best guess, it does feel like taking a chance on two younger guys alongside Pickett, as I've kind of laid out here just now. Like I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe it's because the Kirk Cousins door just feels like it's as shut as possible. Because again, you can't let that situation handicap you from doing what you want to do in the draft. And, I still go back to, I liked Kirk Cousins as a concept when it involved getting him on the vet minimum, not when it involved giving up draft capital to get him. So I almost wonder if like that door's kind of closed here and the Browns are just going to sort of roll out Pickett and a couple younger guys around him. And so that's why I feel that this is more so the what Andrew Berry meant. That Pickett maybe is the oldest guy in the room, and there's two young guys that sort of follow suit behind him. Yes, they could still sign Joe Flacco. They could still sign Carson Wentz. I don't think that does much for the landscape of your room other than gives you like a veteran presence. And there is something to be said for it. And I talked about this with Denny Cunningham last week when we talked about the best and worst case scenarios for a Browns quarterback room. I laid out one of my best case scenarios, and it didn't include like a veteran proven guy who's in his 30s, who's been around and seen some things. And he said that was something that would concern him because you don't have like a veteran to sort of nurture those younger guys coming through, especially if they're rookies. So I think, you sacrifice a little bit there, you give something up there, but I still think there's enough that can be learned from somebody like Kenny Pickett as a veteran in this league who's seen some things and done some things, just went to the Super Bowl last year with an Eagles team. Who can still sort of bring some guidance to that group. Even if you don't think he's the best quarterback, there's still some of that can be rubbed off on him. And so maybe that's the route the Browns would take. To me, that's just what I'm kind of interpreting it as. Maybe they do still go sign a veteran guy. I think Jimmy Haslam hinted at the idea that Joe Flacco could be in play. Maybe when Andrew Berry says skew young, he even means just straight up two rookies alongside somebody like Kenny Pickett. And that's something Stefanski talked about, the idea that he's been in situations where there's been multiple rookies in a room. He's comfortable with it. He's okay trying to develop two guys at once. And that could sort of come to fruition for the Browns on draft weekend. They got a whole bunch of day 3 picks. I think they had 3 6-rounders and a 7th rounder. Like, they theoretically could take somebody late. Kyle McCord. I don't know how late Kyle McCord's sort of projected to go off the top of my head, but like maybe Kyle McCord comes into play late. Maybe a Will Howard comes into play on day 3 and they have to maybe trade up to get him or something like that if they want to be a little more aggressive. Like, there are some names that'll be there that they could sort of look and decide, you know what, let's add another guy to this room. The same way they did with Dorian Thompson-Robinson as a 5th rounder a couple years ago and tried to just sort of spitball something, throw a dart at the board and see if it worked. It didn't. He was part of the Kenny Pickett trade, but you tried something and you can't blame him for that. What's the old saying that you should always draft a quarterback until you have one? And even when you have one, I think teams sometimes are encouraged to still draft one just in case and see what it turns into and see if it becomes an asset you can move at some point, right? The Patriots did that for years with Jimmy Garoppolo and others that they ended up trading to other teams and getting draft capital for. So it never hurts to have more quarterbacks at your disposal. It never hurts to have more options at that position. It's the most important position in the game, and it can always lead to something beneficial to you, whether it's flipping that player for a trade if he works out or he shows some promise, or actually becoming a staple piece of your organization or a solid backup or whatever. So yeah, like I think there is a world where they do draft 2 rookies. We know they're going to at least take one. And then it's just kind of about like what that, I'm just kind of trying to project what I think the room's going to look like. And when I hear Andrew Berry, Skew Young, for some reason, my mind just goes to this idea of Kenny Pickett's your sort of lead horse, leading the charge, the most experienced of the group. And you have 2 younger guys of some iteration, whether that's Malik Willis, Joe Milton, or 2 rookies behind him that are sort of learning as they go. And you're off and running in what I guess we could call a rebuild year or a developmental year to see if any of those guys end up panning out as a future quarterback for this team. One other note I want to get to here real quick, just at the end of the show, the Browns did reveal, Kevin Stefanski revealed it on Monday, that the team will be having 2 joint practices, not just one, during training camp this year. So the first will come week 1 of the preseason. They'll play Carolina in Carolina, and they'll do a 1-day joint practice with them. They'll do a 2-day joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagles, the more traditional setting, in week 2 of the preseason. I found this interesting. It's the first time. I don't know of any other teams that have done 2 sessions of joint practices with 2 different teams. This is definitely the first time the Browns have done it. And in lieu of, not doing the Greenbrier experience this year, it feels like Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are still trying to sort of capture some of that essence, that those vibes of taking a trip, taking the team on the road, getting them to sort of be together somewhere away from home and have some of that team building and team bonding experience, but they're doing it in a different way with sessions that I think they feel are more productive than just regular training camp sessions against your own team. And Kevin Stefanski has said that pretty deliberately, that he believes those joint practices give you a lot more than the actual like inner team work that you do in training camp in the preseason. So just a little note I wanted to add on there. I think it's an interesting sort of change up in terms of the way that they're doing the joint practices this year. And it should be interesting to see how that setup sort of goes and if it's something that sticks for years to come as well. That's another episode Down With You, Dog Pound. I appreciate you joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. We will have plenty more to discuss this week, including Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah's future. For the first time, it seemed like we got a little bit of a positive update on where he's at. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On NFL Draft. Keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.